This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Leonie Persch, and we're going to talk to her today about her music and her story. Welcome to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's always great to talk to musicians. We started a podcast back in 2016. We have over 1,200 episodes, and that's where we started. We started with singer-songwriters and creators, and we have branched into talking to all types of creators, film producers, actors, novelists. But talking to musicians is still a highlight because we are a musician. We have a lot of hats, but I'm a keyboardist, synthesist, so I love talking to musicians. I've been playing since I was 17. I'm 57, so
Oh,
we'll probably
wow.
have a good conversation. I'm in my room with all my Mogs,
Yeah, I can see that.
my synths. So yeah, I think we'll have a good time. I heard that you were in the EDM world, so you know about synths.
Yes, I was for a lot of years. Back when I was living in Berlin for about 5 years. I just moved to LA though 2 months ago, and I'm currently trying to transition a little bit more into the pop world, actually. But still
Yeah,
doing some EDM. It's so much fun.
yeah, because I mean it's interesting. You have a lot of. We'll get into the depth of your story, but you have a lot of aliases, and I being Pam Electric Ghost is my stage name, so I get aliases. I have a couple aliases myself. But it's like, yeah, it's cool to play with different, genres and different types of music, and writers are famous. Like Stephen King had Richard Bachman. That's an alias he would use to do different types of books. If he
Right.
didn't want to do what he's known for, you use an alias, and it's kind of cool to, as a musician, we like to play with those things. Prince was famous for having, different names behind the scenes.
Yeah,
But
it makes so much sense for so many different things. Just as you just said, separating genres, especially for the algorithm on Spotify alone, it makes total sense
makes
too.
a lot of sense. Yeah. So a couple of things we always ask, I guess, before we get to heart of your story is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, I make music because I can't not do it.
Mhm.
I always loved music. My passion for music developed pretty early on. As a kid, I naturally always sang around the house. And right after I graduated, I moved to Berlin and I studied music. I did a bachelor's degree in music. And during that year, I connected with the first people who introduced me to the industry in Berlin, and who I signed my first publishing deal with. So
Wow. So you've got that music theory down. You have a music education, like a Berkeley type of, like Berlin is like a known, like I'm a child of the 70s and I was really entranced with Kraftwerk and Brian Eno's work with Bowie in Berlin and his Bowie albums and the whole kind of connection between like Kraftwerk and the Minneapolis sound with Prince. And so I thought, well, I love all kinds of genres like jazz, rock,
oh,
punk, funk, new wave, everything. So I'm kind of like versed on a lot. I'm a fan before I was a musician, but yeah, it's interesting. When you started, would you primarily focus on your voice, or as a composer or a songwriter? Like maybe describe your path as a musician.
definitely my voice. I was only singing for the longest time because that's what, at least in the beginning, brought me the most joy naturally. And I used to upload a lot of covers on Facebook and Instagram. And that was actually how the first person who connected me to more people in the industry reached out to me via Instagram, because he found one of my cover songs.
Hmm.
And he really liked it. It was a manager back then in Berlin, and he organized the first studio sessions for me after hearing that cover song. So that's how I actually got to make music professionally. And then it just went on. It just got a lot of practice by doing writing session after writing session, and luckily it turned out quite well so far.
I always like to ask songwriters, like, when did they got the permission structure? Because sometimes you start like, on the keyboard. I started like learning classical. I'm a wind. I was taught on woodwinds, so I know how to sheet read, and I was I'm playing other people's music, playing like Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, all kinds of stuff like that. And then at some point, I'm a child of the 70s, and I was into the progressive rock movement, the kind of hard rock movement, fusion, and then new wave and punk came along. And I said, you know what? MTV was around, and it's like, hey, Joy Division, like New Order, these kind of new wave bands. And I said, hey, I want to write something that I'm in tune with, not just play other things. So what kind of gave you a permission structure as a writer, as a musician, to not just cover people, but to actually write your own stuff?
Well, as I said, it just developed quite naturally after I was attending my first songwriting sessions. People seemed to like how I approached songwriting melodies. I started by improvising a lot of melodies. It was like that. I was coming into the studio, and then people just said, okay, just like get into the vocal booth and try whatever comes to your mind. Mm-hmm. And that's how I started doing it. Of course, being very, very nervous in my first sessions, but it turned out well in the beginning, luckily. And this is how I got recommended as a writer for more and more sessions back then.
Well, sometimes it's hard to explain, but like when I talk to writers, they talk about like the Victorian idea of the muse, and kind of like a lot of artists, artists have a permission structure to kind of be in tune with the muse or in tune with like that universe, and we're also kind of in tune with our subconscious, and we're able to kind of pull the inner and the outer. And
absolutely.
I find that like a lot of times, like you learn your voice, you learn how to train your voice, you learn how to use your piano or your instrument. Your voice is an instrument, and then you start to realize, hey, I can use it in all these different ways, and then you start to channel that kind of flow state.
Yes.
And you take advantage of like your 10,000 hours or more of getting to be like in control of your instrument, in your case, your voice. But then like if you trust yourself, you can come up with something. Dylan was known in the studio just to come up with stuff on the fly, but he was a writer. So he was always writing. And then he had this kind of backlog in his head of all these ideas. And so when he became a vocalist, he could just call on that.
Yes.
Because like if you start getting into mindset, I actually have a song structure, and then you learn how to use that voice, then it becomes kind of a natural thing that you can come up with things, and you kind of get the idea. Like I kind of know what works. Like DJs in EDM, they're good at figuring out like what is actually a good, clip or a good loop. What's actually going to be instantaneously? What's the crowd going to like? And if you take that sensibility and then put it into a song structure, you can be a really good songwriter.
Absolutely. Especially in the beginning, it's just a lot of trial and error, obviously. But I'm always a huge advocate of not overthinking stuff. I always tended more towards feeling than theory, to be honest. So it's just about getting that routine down and doing it as often as possible and learning how to trust your own intuition, I feel like.
Your instincts, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's like once you start writing a song, like your first song, like when you get to your 10th song, 10 songs probably better than the first song. You go to 100 songs, you get to 1,000 songs. I've been a writer since I was 17. I got like thousands of compositions. Yeah. And over time, you get a style, or you evolve your style, and you start to trust yourself for what you can do.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of natural.
My friends and family always ask me, how do you never run out of ideas? But for me, honestly, it's quite the opposite. The more often and frequently I write, the more ideas I get.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have a bedroom studio.
Yeah.
Like I'm always getting ideas, and I've over the time I've gone from like different theories. Like I'm in electronic music, so I use a lot of subtractive synths. I use granular synths, digital synths, transistor synths, Hammond B3s, pianos, anything. Just because I want like sometimes I need a piano, sometimes I need something that's sampled. It's whatever serves the song. Sometimes I just need a Fender Strat because that's what I want. But like it's like whatever serves the song, I'm gonna go. And so somebody asked me, so what's your style? It's like, well, it's kind of wherever my head's at. Like if I want to do something more acoustic, then I'm going to go that way. If I want to do something more, sample based, I'm going to go that way. It's like, it's kind of, I don't know which way I'm going to go until I know what I'm feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. That sounds great. Yeah. I also feel like, especially as an emerging artist, you so often get told to narrow down your niche and your genre, but it's also a good thing to just stay open and at least a little bit flexible, even though you're still building your brand. It's just, I like to vary a little bit with the genres or the sounds I use in my
Yeah,
art.
like cross genre. Because like now you got, you came from the EDM kind of, electronic space, but the electronic space, it can mean a lot. Does
Yes.
electronic space mean like what Brian Eno was doing? Does it mean what Joy Division's doing? Does it mean
Yeah.
what like Bob Moog was doing with Sun Ra? Does it mean what like Genesis, or does it mean like what we hear with techno? There's so many different subgenres. It's like, what does it mean?
Absolutely.
So like I like the cross genre. I like to like take a little, maybe take some bebop or modal jazz and mix it with like country, or mix it with punk rock,
Oh,
or take
absolutely.
like classical, or take something like some flapper thing from the 20s, and mix it. It just whatever is going to happen is like, it seems more interesting if I try to do something that's not atypical.
Yeah, just make it sound unique somehow. Make it sound like you. Make it sound, I don't know, just authentic, I feel like, and like something you like. And then, as I said, trial and error and see what your audience likes.
So look, so you have, you're in your feather in your cap is you have the music theory, but you also said like you like the intuition, you kind of like the in the moment.
I'm much bigger on the intuition for sure. Yeah.
But it's cool to have that, the training in your backpack, because then somebody tells you, recording engineer or producer tells you something like, you can understand what they're talking about.
Oh,
Or
it's definitely a big advantage in the studio for sure. Yeah.
yeah, because then you can't get pushed
Yeah.
if you have that knowledge. Like I always say, as musicians, that you should try to expand as much as you can, so you
Yeah.
don't get pushed out. Like if you have a vision, like if you think about like Hendrix had this vision with his feedback. If he didn't push back when the engineer said, "Oh, we're not putting it on record," and he's like, "No, we need to put that on record." You can, as a young person, you could get pushed to say, "Oh, you can't do that," if you don't actually, trust yourself or believe in yourself. Like a 17-year-old Prince, he was asked, like, he could have had Earth, Wind, and Fire produce his record.
Right.
He decided to produce it himself. That
Yeah.
kind of became the foundation of a Minneapolis sound versus using the Earth and Wind and Fire sound. Now, he probably would have been fine going up that way because that's a Grammy Award winning band, but he wanted to have his own vision. So I think sometimes it's cool when people are actually willing to stand up. And as a woman, do you find, as a writer, do you get any pushback when you want to push something you want to do, or people like tell you, "Oh, wait, maybe that's not the way," or you've been able to just navigate the way you want?
Oh, definitely. That's that's actually the topic which my debut single on my new solo artist project focuses on, exactly on that. It's about silencing the external noises, because I've been influenced by external noises, which is kind of human and natural, of course, but for way too long. While I was mainly working as a writer in Berlin back then, and while I was signed to a publishing company and working with lots of labels, there were always lots and lots of external voices and a lot of opinions, which on one hand, of course, I was very grateful for, and the whole experience during the past 5 years was very valuable to me, and I wouldn't want to miss any of that. But on the other hand, of course, over the course of your career and while you're growing, you get a better feeling for what you actually want for yourself, and also find a way back why I actually started that journey of building it.
Why you want to be a musician?
Exactly. I always wanted to get into the music industry because I wanted to be an artist myself. But then I started as being a writer, and while I was enjoying that a lot, and while it taught me a lot, of course, in the end, I was losing myself a little bit in that process. And now, after I came to LA, I just started my first fully independent solo artist project. And this time it's all about working what I really want to work on and bringing out the sounds and the message I really want to bring out into the world.
Well, that's a good seg to kind of bring it up because I have it up here.
Yes.
And this is your first single under your name, right? As far as I know.
Yes. The first one under my real name. Yes.
And it's called Blindfolded.
Yes.
And let me make sure I got it queued up because I think it was starting to play a little bit. Wait a second, I don't want to do that. But yeah, we're gonna play a little bit of it and 30, 40 seconds of it, and just to give people a good feel of what we were just talking about. So hold on, I'm gonna actually play it.
I've been missing the silence. Take my mind into the deep. Let the talking get to me. I got lost in the wild, yeah. It's a lonely road, so I've been saying goodbye. Easy, you're making it easy for you to take my eyes where you want them to be. Easy, I'm making it easy for you to keep my mind on the things that you need.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Did it take a while, because if you were a writer, to actually find your singing voice? But you said you were into voice, but like going and working on your own project, was that a lift, or it wasn't too much of a lift?
Well, I wrote a lot of stuff before I actually decided for this one to be the debut single. That's for sure. And I could definitely use the skills I built over the last couple of years to start this project, whether it's the skills I built creatively or in business knowledge, which is also pretty important. And or in the studio, recording wise, as we just said, communication wise, like letting the producer know where exactly you want to take the sound. If you're able to do that, that's definitely
and how you want to treat the vocals. I mean, like, I can get into the recording engineering, like every little second you can color.
Yeah.
Like a sound engineer, and they can go and run through the processors, and they can give it a little echo, or they can give it a little delay, or they
I'm
can
so nitty-gritty on vocal production. Producers often hate me for that.
You probably know what you want. Like if you have your visions, like if you want to do shadow vocals, if you want to do multi-track like choruses, if you want to like do emphasis and like change the spread to kind of focus when you're listening, you know where you want the focus, because like it's your show. Like when you know what you want, you can then you can take somebody and say, okay, well maybe the engineer or the producer has a different opinion. Like if you know what you want.
I always, of course, I welcome different opinions, because like it's almost always the case that two brains work better than one in my experience. But as long as you can communicate well and find a good middle, or something that is on the level you want to have it, I think it works well. And luckily I found a producer who's quite patient with me going into every single little detail right now. And it's really fun to also be involved in the technical side of creating.
Yeah, so how involved are you on that technical side? Because I can get kind of deep.
Well, I'm not a producer myself, and I'm learning a lot about vocal production myself right now, but I haven't done the production on that debut single. I sat right next to the producer and I told him how I wanted to sound, how I wanted everything to sound like
on the board, as it was being like mastered or engineered.
Yeah,
you're having like real time input to like make it be.
Yeah, I can tell someone how much reverb do I want, what kind of reverb do I want. Do I want the vocals to sound more bright or have more lows? And I try to gain more and more vocabulary in terms of production, and I just want to be in the room when when the production is done. That's most important for me. But I also try to give up a little bit more trust and don't be as much of a control freak in the studio anymore.
But in terms of like the lyrics, that's all you wrote everything.
The lyrics, no, I had a co-writer for this song. Yeah.
But you have a co-writer. Now, in terms of like the actual tracks, like the musical tracks, how much input do you have? Do you work with other like musicians or writers or producers to come up with like the beats or the actual harmonies or the grooves or the, those things?
You mean in general or for this one?
Yeah, for this particular song, this debut single.
So for Blindfolded, I started with one producer who I met for the first time in the session. We started creating the song, and then I continued with another producer who I worked with before. And I think it was a really good collaboration in this case because different people brought different ideas into the project. And so, yeah, it was two producers, one co-writer, and then a mastering engineer.
But in terms of like the sound itself, like, Michael Jackson was famous, like working with Quincy Jones. He would like tap out, hum, sing, like what the piano, what the synths were going to do. Do you do that level, or do you kind of listen to things and say, I want to use that, I want to use this, it kind of fits what you're doing? Or I was trying to dive into a little like your songwriting process.
Well, you mean and kind of comping the lyrics, or sorry?
Yeah, the music that accompanies the lyrics. Like how much are you involved in a structure?
A lot. I go through every recording track, and I'm the one who says, okay, I want to have this line from this recording and this line from this recording. And sometimes it's even only single words. So as I said, I'm very nitty gritty on but I'm also trying to get the perfect mix of getting it on a good polished level, but still making it sound kind of natural.
Dude, how much of your EDM background helps with you knowing what you want there?
Well, a lot, but I would say I wasn't as involved in the production for most of my EDM projects as I am right now with my new independent solo artist project. Yeah.
But you actually have more, like you're more in the driver's seat here.
Yes, at least.
So you're like the final say, because it's your song, it's your name, and like how everything's going is like it's your name on the moniker, like it's your single. So it's like your vision has to kind of pass your test.
Like exactly, because I have a very clear vision in mind, and I think that's a good thing. So I can create, but also I don't want to be too stuck on that one vision. A vision can, change over time. Right now, I want to do what feels most authentic and true to myself. And while I was working as a writer or under my different aliases in the EDM genre, I did a lot of collaborations, especially with DJs who either already had an established sound or who had like lots of opinions or like visions.
So how does that work? Like it's kind of like if you're in a band. Like I grew up being in like 4-piece, 5-piece, like rock progressive type bands or funk, jazz kind of fusion type bands. And when you're in that band, and if you're like, sometimes you have a band that has a head writer, right? Yeah. And they kind of dictate everything. And and then you have bands that are more collaborative, like REM. Everybody kind of gave their own piece and they all had equal say. So some structures, it's kind of like, it's in hybrid. It's like, like maybe the two writers. Like, you got Lennon, but the Beatles, like Lennon and McCartney. And you had Harrison and Ringo, and they had ideas, but their ideas were kind of pushed down compared to Lennon and McCartney's ideas.
Yeah, right. Well, for me, it was different with every single project because sometimes we were 4 or 5 writers in the room, and then sometimes it was only me and the producer who was also the artist/DJ on the project. So it always depended, but I love that I had all those different experiences. And of course, there were people who loved to take control on everything and wanted to shut down any other opinions.
Yeah, because does the producer kind of have in that EDM world, does the producer have the final say?
not
does the
always.
DJ have the final say? It kind of depends on what the weight of the relationship is.
Yeah, it depends, especially when you're an emerging artist or quite new to the industry, people try to like take the lead. But
Yeah.
as you're growing with your experience, you find your voice and you learn how to voice your own opinions. And the better you get at that, the more serious people will take you. So
Yeah,
it's
it becomes like a signature sound thing. 'Cause, like, if you associate with a certain engineer or DJ, they might have a certain sound,
yeah,
certain samples, certain loops, certain like atmosphere that they have.
yeah,
And every artist that comes under their wing, they get that. They get that. Maybe that's what they want. But if
yeah,
you have your own vision, you might work in that place. Like Hendrix worked with the Isley Brothers. He worked with Little Richard. That wasn't really his sound, but he
yeah,
did it because he was a sideman trying to get experience.
yeah,
Then
exactly.
eventually he breaks out, and there's like Hendrixian has nothing to do with the Isley Brothers or Little Richard,
Right.
but he was able to kind of fit in that just to get the experience, in the early 60s. But
Right.
yeah, it's this idea, like it kind of is like the same issue experience. It's like you work with people to get the opportunity, get the experience, but as you start to know what you want,
Definitely. Just
you might
have,
not want that flavor. You might want your own flavor.
well, but also a lot of times of course, you listen to the music that people put out before you get into the studio with them. And then you still can decide if you want to create with those people or if you don't want to create with them. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go on Spotify and listen to their artist project, you get kind of a feeling if it's going to be a fit in the studio or
Yeah,
not.
it's gonna work for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because like when you collaborate, it's like art. Like sometimes like an example, like in a band, like a bass player, I could write because I'm a keyboardist. I can write all the parts, and I would have bass lines and drum lines and everything. And I work with people, and it's like, and the bass player would come in, and he's like, "Well, that's a nice bass player, but I can add this to it, right?" And because that's their instrument, they actually have a bass line that actually works better. But some people would say, no, keep the one I had in the DAW.
yeah.
Right. So like, yeah, people are willing to give and people are not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I had especially co-writers with me in the studio, met them for the first time that day, and it just clicked and it worked super well. And I worked with those people for like the last years frequently, but there were also, of course, other experiences. And then you just can decide to not work with those people again, and that's it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's great when you run into a situation and it's like everybody kind of agrees with the way you you hear it, right? Like, so you come in, you collaborate, and you actually add something to it. And
Yes.
maybe it wasn't what they initially intended, but they say, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah.
And then you have the other people are more top down. It's like it's got to be their way or the highway. It's
Yeah.
like
In
if you
my
have to
opinion,
get the gig, it's like that's the gig. Or that's the gig, then that's the gig.
yeah, my opinion is just most important. You stay professional and you stay nice and not talk down on anybody because, of course, often it comes to experience and the skills people build over years or even decades. But you still can learn something from somebody who has been writing for a year or two. You never
Oh
know.
yeah, you take their experience. I mean, yeah, you run into somebody who's been doing something for like more years than you, but then
Yes.
in music, sometimes the new idea is not in the canon. It's like anything that's creative. It's like you might have something that you really believe in,
Right.
and it's not really being used that much, or it's not been out there, right? So then people would try to say, "Well, that's not going to work," but then it's like your intuition and your feel
If
and
it
your
gives you goosebumps, you
yeah,
should
they like just
bring
stay
it
on.
out there.
Hold on to it. Don't get pressured. And I
Yep.
always tell younger musicians because just because you're young doesn't mean like if you've been putting the work in, you might have that Hendrixian thing. You might have that Coltrane thing. You might have something like a Sunrise. You might have this thing that maybe hasn't been heard.
Yeah.
And if you don't get pushed out of defending it, promoting it, advocating for it, right?
Exactly. Just go for it. Find the right people who believe in you because just because it didn't work in certain rooms doesn't mean it won't work at all. Just got to keep going. going
Do you
through.
find like the environment for writing and creativity, like in Berlin versus Los Angeles? I would kind of like go in and say, like, I guess it's totally different environments, but what did you like in either one or both?
Well, it's not that different, to be honest, in writing rooms. I feel like what I kind of like, the business part gets communicated better upfront over here,
Mm,
while it often stays unclear until
the
the song
last
is
minute.
almost finished. And then people stop the process because either they don't want to pay the fee they get asked for, or they feel treated unfairly
Mhm.
with the writer split or master split they're being offered. So I feel like that kind of communication, at least from my experience, is a little bit better over here.
So the business transparency, and that's
Yeah.
important because a lot of times artists we get burned by that because
Yeah.
a lot of artists is like if we get an opportunity to play, oh, work out the contract after, work to
Mhm.
get an opportunity to collaborate. Oh, I'll work out the contract, and then we always get burned
Right.
if we don't have the business savvy, and we kind of, our artistic nature will tend to say, yeah, I'm an artist.
Right.
I want to have the opportunity to work here or get here. I'll work it out. I'll deal with it. But it always burns us if we don't try to keep that present and have a foot in that door.
Exactly. And I get it. Sometimes people just don't want to kill the vibe. But in the end, you have to be upfront about it because you're investing time, you're investing creativity, and you want to move forward with a certain project. And business is a part of it all. So you just need to communicate it as clear as possible, in my opinion.
And I want to jump into a thing outside business, which is the kind of spirituality of music. Like I always feel that music kind of comes from like the cosmos, comes from the universe. I'm a Buddhist, so I have these different maybe perspective of where I think it's coming from for me. But
Mhm.
everybody, a lot of times I deal with musicians, and they all have some kind of spirituality, some kind of connection to like the universe or the world in that way. How do you approach that?
Well, I definitely have, like, spirituality for me is very important. In my opinion, you attract who you are and how you think about life. And that's proved itself true so many times in my life.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
And like a law of attraction, like a law of attraction. Like if you have a good vibe, positive vibe, then maybe that keeps on happening. If you have kind of a prickly vibe, then you might not be getting through as easily.
yeah, I often experience when I have a bad day and I begin spiraling, more bad things start happening. And
Cascading.
it's the other way around. So yeah, you just should try to focus on the positive as much as possible, even though I get it, it's difficult, especially if you're still trying to establish yourself in the music industry. But I mean, you just have to really start believing yourself, or who else will if
Yeah, yeah,
you don't?
and some people might find that arrogant because in music, if you're a performing musician, it gets a little theatrical. You have your stage persona,
Yeah,
and when people see your stage persona versus like your normal self,
yeah,
it's kind of there's a lot of bravado. You
yeah,
know, and so like if you get out in front of that crowd, well, to be there, you got to be in the headspace because like people are looking at you. You're like it's kind of like Bowie. Bowie had that presence. Freddie
yeah,
Mercury had a presence. You get these big stars. You get, DJs. They have a presence. They got to get people hyped. You got to be a hype person. You got to sell it. And
yeah.
so and then people like, well, how could you be like that? Well, how if I don't believe in myself, who else is gonna believe me?
Yeah, then what am I doing if I don't believe in myself? Why am I investing all that time and money, that, everything, that energy?
Yeah, it's an energy thing. Like it's like once you get, it says nothing like being like performing a song, being in a studio, just just play, doing delivering from a vocal performance or musical performance in any aspect. To me, I kind of get in this like zone.
Yeah.
Even whether I'm creating or performing, and it feels, it's why I do it. I like the way it feels when you're in that zone, whether I'm writing zone or performing zone, and I would do it whether I make money or not. Now,
Yes.
you wanna be able to get compensated, so you do the things that are smart. Now you've been able to, like, you have sync licensing deal with a sync deal with like Disney. You had
Yes.
millions of streams. What would your advice to musicians that are trying to monetize, maybe lessons learned that you have done that they could apply to, like, struggling or emerging artists?
Well, my number one advice would be try to connect to as many people as possible, reach out, be initiative, because people don't wait for you, especially if you don't have a name in the industry yet. So reach out. I mean, it's never been as easy as nowadays, I feel like, because of social
Mhm.
media. You could reach out to anybody, any of your idols or
Yeah,
mentors you like to work with. You can just drop them a DM and hopefully they'll reply. And if not, you'll drop another or another until they do. Um, so yeah, just go for it. And in terms of earning, I feel like there are a lot of options for musicians apart from just putting out music, whether it's merch or performing, of course, or other digital products. I mean, there's a lot you can
there's a
do.
lot. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you can, like, I got the merch. So
Yeah.
this is my logo, and because I'm in a multimedia world. I have a band, Phantom Electric Ghost, started as a band. It's my musical vehicle, but then I have a podcast with like 1,200 episodes.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
on this podcast, I've been able to interview like Grammy award-winning producers just because I DM'd them.
Yeah.
I DM'd
Exactly.
on
Yeah.
Instagram, and then I got them on the show. I didn't even go through an agent. I went directly to them and got them on the show.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
like, so you can do things that you wouldn't believe. Like, I saw a band I really liked from France, DM'd them, and they got them on the show like twice. And so, once you get out there, and you just have to believe that you have like the right to do it.
Exactly.
I think a lot of times people don't feel like, well, I don't know if I could talk to them. Like, as soon as you think like that,
Exactly.
it's not going to work.
Don't give up after one person's not gonna reply. You have to, of course, try multiple times in most cases. At least I had to, especially in the beginning. But you need to get active and you need to reach out to people because nobody is really waiting for you, especially in this industry, I feel like. And be brave, bet on yourself, and make people see you. That would be my number one.
Yeah, like you said, it's important to like keep on going, even if you have setbacks. It's like, as musicians, and we all know, it's like it's a lot of practice. It's a lot of having to self-fund things, before you can even get anything going.
Yeah,
Um, that you invest in your instrument, you invest in your skill set, you invest in all the,
being an
mastering.
artist is expensive.
Yeah, it's like to get your vision. You could even you could have something that was successful, and then suddenly you're like, hey, I want to do something that's not it was not in my wheelhouse. Like, it wasn't what I was known for.
Yeah,
And then suddenly you're self-funding something. And and a lot of times, like, when you do that, it doesn't always work the first time, doesn't work the second time, third time. But like a lot of people who decide to follow their vision,
yeah,
it's not like it's going to be 0 to 100. And a lot of times people give up because they want instant gratification. I think it's like the long-term strategy, the
right,
sustainable strategy as an artist is, I've been playing since I was 17. I know a lot of guys that stopped, and
right.
I just kept on going because I love it. And then opportunities happen, and you're able to do things like you said. There's merch, there's like sync licensing, there's like, doing music for video games. There's advertising that needs like little snippets of music. There's all kinds of opportunities to license your music and do things. So like when in the sense of that, do you think a lot of musicians do? They're just trying to get to a top 10 list, or trying to get to a top 20 list, or trying to get booked
Without
on a
doing the
tour?
actual work.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's wishful thinking, unfortunately, for a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Lately I met a lot of great ambitious people who really go for it, and it's really inspiring because
mhm.
you can do a lot more than you think initially. And yeah,
it's like the bravado of just putting yourself out there.
Exactly. And also teach yourself as many skills as possible. For one, because you're more free in how you create something. For example, I just started editing my own music videos, and I never did that before. And it's just so much fun because you can create the thing you want to create even more than you envision it. And you also, on the side, you can save some money. So,
Oh yeah. It's like everybody's gotten into like DAWs so they can learn how to actually, and it's like in the hip hop world and electronic music, it's like kind of like the thing. And I got stacks of synths, I got multi-tracks, I got all these, digital audio workstations and, MPCs. And it's just over time, it's like, because I was in bands, and then the bands people got married, they stopped wanting to do it. And I said, well, how can I keep on writing music? So it became like this idea of the Ghost is a band, but it's just me. And I just play everything. And I use a lot of these modern tools so I could actually play everything. So I could actually put down like make it seem like there's a band there, but it's all me. Because that's my vision is like, that's, I was just dedicated. I have a vision, what I want. And so I would do it. And there's a lot of people that, you can do that with the tech that's out there now. You can actually, if you put the time in,
yeah, right.
and the tools are, you could actually create that. And it was like, wow, I thought it was a band. It's like, no, it's just one guy doing it.
Right. I feel like for some skills, there's a certain amount of hours invested necessary, especially for production. So I like to give up that part. But yeah, on the other hand, it's never too late to start learning something. So
this gives you a good scratch pad today, because if you want to, I mean, you could go into GarageBand, you could do a little sketch. You can go into a DAW.
For sure.
You can learn enough about it. You can put enough of a demo to get a vision.
Oh, that for sure. Especially nowadays with AI, you can do so much.
Yeah, with the prompt engineering, like even if you're somebody like I can't get into the DAW, and I don't know how to handle the multi-tracks, and I can't figure that out, the drum machines and all that. You can do the prompt engineering, and if you're a vocalist and you like, I need somebody to give me this type of bass line or this type of drum beat, you can get really specific and get really close to what you want, and then work it out. So it gets closer to your vision.
Yeah.
Without having to kind of compromise. Oh, that's kind of what I wanted, but I can't really know. I don't know how to get to it.
Exactly. To demonstrate, you have so many different possibilities and options nowadays. That's just amazing.
Yeah. Do you find that helps you a lot? Like in the way the tools are today, that you can get really, like, instead of being 60% of your vision, you could get to like 95% of your vision.
Well, for me personally, it works a little different, to be honest, most of the times, because I like to sit down with my producer in the studio and start the new project from scratch. And then we'll choose all the sounds together, even partly do the EQing together. And then I start improvising my melodies on that instrumental we started working on. And then after that, most of the times I start writing the lyrics. So that's how I approach my songs most of the times.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if you think, well, I love to just have an open mic and a multi-track with all my things going, and I start with like generative sequencing.
Yeah.
And then I'll play with like just scratch vocals, just like maybe even just hum something out over like 808s or 720 drum machines going. But like I have a lot of control over what those drums are going to do, what the bass players are going to do. I mean, I got Moogs that are actually playing Moog bass lines on and stuff. So like in that kind of world, like if you have the tools, you can be very specific. If you're a musician, from a standpoint, you actually play bass or play guitar, play keyboards, you can get by yourself a lot of basic tracks done.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And so, in a world where you don't have to wait for your drummer to show up, you don't have the bass player, you can't find
time. Yeah.
Don't talk to a guitar player and he said, I can't find bass players, but now I got, I've got my DAW and now I wrote the bass.
Exactly.
So,
That's also one reason why I really enjoy to have like a smaller set producer team here in LA right now, because the waiting time I had for certain EDM projects back in Berlin drove me insane
Does
sometimes.
that take the fun out of doing a composition if you got to sit and wait? Like when the iron's hot and then you're set made to wait,
Right.
does it like wreck the process?
Exactly. Yeah. It was just because sometimes so many people were involved, or the artist just took a long time on deciding if he or she, or if they wanted to have the song at all. So that just slowed down the process so many times. And if you have your own project you're working on, it's just nice that you kind of can decide when and how you want to proceed with things.
So you find it in LA, like if the iron's hot and you got an idea, you can actually execute it and you're not sitting around waiting.
Right.
That's really free. I mean, that's like revolutionary. If you were in a place where you couldn't, and maybe you felt like, well, that's the way it is, and then you get to a place where, wow, like I heard like Nashville, like, is a place where there's a lot of songwriters, there's a lot of different genres, people are doing that. I've talked to a lot of bands out of there, a lot of musicians out of that area, and it's not just country, and like there's EDM, there's rock, there's blues, there's like everything, and they can find studios and session musicians, and so your bands can just boom cross pollinate with like a blues band, like an EDM big band, bring a blues guitar player in, and boom, and it's done because they're there,
Yeah. Right.
So it's like it must be fun to actually be in the space of an artist, right? Because a lot of artists,
definitely,
we have day jobs. I'm a software guy in my day job, so I can afford my Moogs. But like I would rather not have to have that job. But it's cool. How does it feel you're a full-time musician, right?
I am, but I wasn't always. I actually also worked for a real estate agent for a couple of months, which was very fun because, for one, it always was a field that I am very interested in, and for two, it gave me even more funds for my artist project. So. I hear so many artists or writers or producers who are kind of almost ashamed if they have another job, but in the end it's just, for one,
well, it helps you get going. It's like, being in the software world, I can get the equipment I need to get my vision, right?
It's just smart, and it helps you to level up your project or whatever you want to do in music faster. So
yeah, I mean, if I was worried, if I'm a starving artist and I can't pay the rent,
right,
I might be coming from that point of view when I wrote my song, but do I really want to be in that mindset all the time?
Right.
I'd rather be able to have some level of stability so I can actually get it done.
Yeah. Also, I think peace of mind is gold for creating. So that's a big part. Yeah.
Well, blues musicians kind of think they got to be in the downs, but and punk aesthetic is kind of like, oh, we got to be kind of at the edge, but you don't have to.
Right. So I think it's smart to have alternatives to get in more money and be able to be as independent as possible.
And independence is a big thing, because I mean that's what like your song Blindfolded is kind of getting at that in a way. You're kind of talking about having, maybe you can talk more about, like, is that the vision you have for more songs? Are there more songs that are coming from that perspective, or you have different songs that you're working on with different stories?
Oh, definitely different stories as well. I usually write a lot about interpersonal relationships. That's a big thing. So this song was actually something different, which I did for a long time. But it just felt very reflective because I spent so much time in solitude and introspection lately that this kind of was something that I had to get out, and it felt so natural and true to myself and authentic. So for me, it was the perfect start to get the foundation of my message, of my vision for my next move, for my upcoming path out there. And but there will definitely be different stories and different invitations to other parts of my life.
Are you planning like on the single route to like put out singles periodically, or focus on this song for a certain length of time, or have like an EP or have an album? What's your kind of overall strategy?
So for this year, I plan to have a couple more singles out, and then next year I'll probably release my first EP, and then also I plan to release my first album within the next 1 to 2 years.
Now, what do you think about, like, I was just talking to a company or a person on the podcast that was working with a lot of musicians that are into the physical media now, because there's a whole generation of younger people that like vinyl, that like cassettes, that like the idea of things not being just all digital. And we've kind of been living in this all digital age, but there, at least in the States, there is this kind of trend, and I've heard it's worldwide, where people like that, CD or vinyl or cassette, because it gets them connected to the artist in
Yeah.
a physical way. What are your opinions of things about that?
I think it's beautiful, and I definitely want to bring physical products into my artist project. But for me right now, for this new project, it makes sense to grow my fan base a little more first, and then bring in all the other.
It's like an evolution. Like you eventually will go there,
Yes.
but you got to focus on the digital space. Sorry.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot of tool sets we have for distribution. Digital is immediate, but I think like when you get to the merch tables, like the t-shirts, like, it's like t-shirts are what in sweatshirts and hoodies and pens and posters. A lot of artists, that's what we actually can make more money from that, physically when we do shows. But the thing that we kind of, I'm a child of the 70s, and I loved going to the record store or going to an old record store and finding vinyls or finding CDs, them out of print, or things that from bands that weren't, maybe the biggest band in the world, but I get a niche. And you dive into an artist when you get an EP, you get more than what like the single. So you got to see the multifaceted nature. Like you have a lot of different, like as an artist, you have a lot of facets. You have a lot of ways that you can express yourself. Sometimes your single doesn't represent everything you can do.
Yes.
And I think some people don't realize, like, that's why I love the albums in the 70s and, the CD in the 80s, 90s, is I always like going deeper. I like the B-sides. Sometimes I like the B-sides better than the A-side.
Definitely. I mean, I think albums are a beautiful thing to tell a little bit more of the whole story. But, as an artist, sometimes even it doesn't sound as romantic or as creative, you still need to view and approach your project a little like a business. And in the beginning, if you're still an emerging artist, it just makes sense to build over time, with starting by releasing single after single, especially nowadays. And, when the time comes, I happily release my first album. That's definitely one of my goals I'll approach. But for now, it's just I'll show a little bit more of myself with each single that's going to be released, and just looking forward to create more music right now.
Do you plan on doing any kind of live performing or touring?
Well, I'll wait a little bit with touring, but I have my first live shows coming up next month in LA.
Oh, cool. So you said that's an opportunity for the merch and everything, and this at least to get connected with the fans.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
When you play live, are you just going to do the single, or do you going to do covers and other songs? Do you get to do more than just your one set? I mean, just
definitely more than one song. The first show will probably be just a small acoustic show where I will play 4 to 5 songs, and then the next one will be a little bit longer and probably will have also have a full band on stage. But first, I'm going to start with only me and a guitarist next to me, and making it a little bit more intimate.
Well, that's cool. It also gives a variation from what you hear in the media. Because like sometimes it's like I always like the idea, like when you go to see a live show, that the live performance isn't going to be note for note exactly what was on the record.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives you like this way to show like live is live, right? And you have an ability to expand
Right.
on what you did. And even if you play the single, you have an ability to kind of maybe change it a little bit
One out here and there. Yeah.
yeah. And to me, it's fun because, if I just keep it the same all the time, not that I'm going to radically change it, but just to make it so like, oh, if somebody's doing a live recording,
show a little bit more of your personality through it. Yes.
Your fans will start to notice, like Pearl Jam fans are known for going to 2 or 3 shows
right
in a row because Eddie Vedder would actually change the way he does the set. Like
exactly.
every night he would do it different. So it's actually a reason to go see the second night.
Yeah.
Go see him on Friday and Saturday. It's not the same show. So it's actually worth.
Yeah, that's exciting for sure. You got to make it exciting. And it's a great way to connect with people who vibe with your music. And you can talk a little bit in between songs and just make it a really personal experience for everyone.
Yeah, it's that personal experience, the connection with your fans. That's how fans will get into your, music. Why they'll want to buy your T-shirt, buy your poster, get on your mailing list.
Yeah.
Have you ever? I don't know. Back in the 70s, there was a lot of fan clubs. There were like fanzines, and what do you think about that? Have you ever thought like going into that, like maybe the digital version of that, or like on a website, or having a way to kind of like a newsletter or something? I don't know what works anymore, but that used to work for the bands I followed.
Well, I have a newsletter and I have more people submitting to that one lately, luckily. But apart from that, well, in terms of a fan club, for now, I'm good with building the newsletter list. And apart from that, one thing I just started to organize, which is really close to my heart, is starting to organize a monthly networking dinner series. I'm hosting at different locations every month, with the first coming up on May 30th. And there have already been a lot of people showing interest in that, which makes me really happy because I know from my own experience, it can be hard to find the right community. And especially after I just moved here 2 months ago and still looking for the right people to work with partly. Sometimes instead of waiting, as we said previously, you just got to go out there and
the event, create a way to networking event. That's smart.
Your own community. And
so that's the whole thing is like being able to be in a community or a scene. If you get in that scene, if you go to a club and you go with a collective, like I've actually been in like electronic, music experimental collectives, and we approach a club. If I go just as the ghost, well, then I'm the ghost. But if I go with like 5 or 10 bands, then we take over that whole show, that whole night, and we might get it for the week. Maybe I would take it to another club.
Right.
So then you actually know people, and then you might work on projects together.
Yeah.
It just opens up it creates like that CBGB kind of scene, the Whiskey a Go-Go kind of scene. Like a lot of the bands, they cross-pollinate and then they go on tour and it opens up things,
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think
that's cool.
You should always stay open to meet new people and exchange your stories and experiences. And you never know who you'll meet to collaborate on your next song with, or just to, talk to.
It's just cool to have that kind of, community, because music is about kind of a community, being able to find, people who are in the same kind of headspace or even different headspace, but in the same, they're an artist, but they're in a different area, and it can inspire you. You can inspire you like, oh, I'm going to go into this direction. And suddenly you're doing a punk rock album. You're doing like a trance album. You're doing like a synthwave album. You're doing this album. It's like or you're working on somebody else's record because they heard something that they say, oh, I could bring something that could color my song. That could color my project. And so then this gives you your Rolodex.
Yes, definitely. You never know.
It's kind of like the podcast space, like once I get out here, I get people who want to, come on the show because they see me out here. So it just like by showing up, creates the opportunity, creates the Rolodex, and now I got this big Rolodex of people that know other people and say, hey, maybe you want to come on, or maybe they want to come on. And he's like, hey, you know, another musician who wants to come on, then boom, they come on. So
Right.
that's, yeah, it's just kind of self-fulfilling continual cycle, and then you're going forward instead of like, hey, I have no opportunities.
Exactly. It can give you a lot of great, valuable energy to meet new people. And even if it's not going to be a new collab, just hearing their stories, their experiences, and how were there, they took their life,
the
what
knowledge,
they
life knowledge.
accomplished, can inspire you a lot.
Yeah, life experience, you know, just hearing from somebody that's, you know, in a new environment, because you're new to the scene. You find people that's like, well, I've been touring, like somebody who's like, I know this scene, I know how to address this scene, I know how to tour here, I know where the opportunities are. That, you know, not that you're gonna work with them, but they give you the benefit of their experience, and like that knowledge transfer or the sharing of the knowledge, you know,
Yes.
that's always cool. Because like that's what everybody needs. You got to hear all the different aspects so you have options. Like if you don't know the possibilities, then you're like, oh, you hear other people's lived experience, and then you find it, you know.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I just try to get out as much as possible, because only sitting at home and, doesn't get you anywhere I mean, I won't say nowhere, but options are definitely limited if you don't put yourself out there.
Yeah, you got to be able to, you know, mingle with the crowd and get out there and
Right.
connect in a positive way. That's cool, and that's where your headspace is. And I want to thank you for, we actually hit the hour mark, which we always hit faster than we ever think. And we have your leoniepersch.com link below. That will be fully clickable. We were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on multiple platforms like Spotify Video Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcast, many others by tomorrow. But we're live on those channels and will be immediately available on the channels I mentioned. And I want to thank you for being on the show tonight.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.